Have you ever felt a deep, unexplainable feeling that you just can't shake? A feeling that doesn't seem to belong to your own life experiences? Let's talk about an Indigenous boy, raised by a loving, non-Indigenous foster family, who found it almost impossible to go to school. Every time he walked into the building, a powerful agitation washed over him, making it hard to focus. All he wanted to do was run away, even though he desperately wanted to learn and build a better future for himself. Then, there's a little girl, staring at her reflection in the mirror, filled with confusion. She looks at her mother, then back at herself, wondering why they don't look alike, or even sound the same. They are so completely different, as she was never told she was adopted. She questions what could have happened to make her so different, a question that carries a weight far beyond simple genetics. And imagine a young boy, hiding under his house as bedtime approaches. He's not avoiding a chore, he's avoiding sleep. His dreams aren't filled with childhood fantasies, but with terrifying visions. He sees himself in an army uniform, constantly running and hiding from people who want to harm him. These aren't his memories, yet they feel so real. His adoptive family just look at him and blame TV. These stories, while different, are connected by a powerful, invisible thread. The Indigenous boy's struggle is tied to the trauma his mother endured at a residential school. The boy's nightmares are echoes of a war his father fought in. The little girl's confusion about her appearance touches on a deep history she inherited without ever being told. This phenomenon is linked to something called epigenetics and intergenerational trauma. It's the idea that the experiences of our ancestors, the trauma, the hardships, the resilience, can leave a molecular imprint on our genes. These imprints don't change our DNA sequence, but they can affect how our genes are expressed, influencing our health, our behaviors, and even the beliefs we form about ourselves and the world. What we inherit is more than just eye color or height. We can inherit the echoes of a past we never lived. These echoes can shape our personal beliefs, our anxieties, and our strengths in profound ways. Understanding this helps us see that some of our deepest struggles might not have started with us. It gives us a new lens through which to view ourselves with more compassion and begin a journey of healing, as well as the understanding that we are far more than just the person reflecting back at us when we stand in front of a mirror. We are the continuance of a generational story.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, A Box with No Lid. A channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness around the lived reality of trauma, complex trauma, removal trauma, the world that is adoption and the world that is foster care, but I'd also like to bring forward what I've learned through my own personal journey as I am an adoptee, and what I've learned over many, many years as a practitioner and as an advocate, all with the simple hope that something you may learn here will not only be supportive in your own healing journey, but can help to improve the quality of your life or the lives of those around you, if you know of adoptees or those that have gone through foster care, through your understanding of certain challenges that they have created from their beginnings. Now, like I said in the last video, in this video, yes, it's the next in the adoption series, and I'm circling around this ball of emotion, of experiential emotion created in the process of removal of a child from their biological family and their placement within either a long-term foster care or an adoptive family. And as I explained in the last video briefly, due to the overwhelmment of all those experiences and due to the underdeveloped mind of an infant, remember the cognitive processes, our ability to process and create a mental timeline to be able to step out experiences for our body to be able to process through them is not developed yet. That doesn't kick in till, an infant is 12 to 18 months old. In the beginning of our early childhood, as I've explained in other videos, we're primarily to learn physical sensation, develop the neural pathways to sensorily interact with our surroundings before our ability to judge and observe comes online. When you remove a child, that need to judge and observe is forced online prematurely, which fundamentally alters the development of that child. And as I mentioned in the last video, this one gets a little theoretical because there is very little research or understanding around this. But when you spend a lot of time around a certain demographic, you can start to see if it quacks like a duck, looks like a duck, it's a duck. And one of the common things I've seen for after decades of being around the world that is adoption and the world that is foster care, is the power of epigenetics, the power of the amount of information we inherit directly from our biological ancestry. The way we assess, the way we interpret, the way we process, the base structures of our personality, mannerisms, fixations, what we pursue. So much of this is passed on generationally, as well as anxiety states, threat states, aggression states. You know, I was born, I'm a Vietnam era baby. My father was a 3-tour veteran, and my biological father was a 3-tour veteran in Vietnam. I was born from war. My infancy and young childhood was filled with dreams and sensations of a conflict I was never part of, but I inherited them from my father, as well as the challenges that Agent Orange creates. But within that epigenetic process, our dominant personality traits or aspects or beliefs. And that's what I want to get the message out with this particular video. When you see children that have come from very rough backgrounds, they have a dominant trait that they have latched onto. And that trait becomes a defining factor of their personality. And then sometimes if you see it when you're coming from abusive childhoods, the prison system is filled with people that can show you this, is that need for aggression, that need for control, that need for dominance to be safe. That is an epigenetic trait that gets generationally passed on. That is a component of generational trauma. Most children that come from a childhood trauma or abuse pathway, their abusers, their parents, their biological parents, were abused themselves. When you're looking at lower socioeconomic areas of societies, when you're looking at the persecution of indigenous societies and the world and reality that has created. There are so many, and poverty and all these sorts of things, you can see the family generational pathway, the generational trauma pathway. Well, that plays out in the world that is adoption and the world that is foster care. And this components of what is perceived as stubborn or certain dominant personality traits can create real opposition with a non-biological family that you've been placed with. Because if it's not the same with them, it's a point of conflict. It's a point of confusion. It's a point of contention. When you're looking at cross-race or cross-cultural adoptions, where the adopted child is of a different biological or different genetic race or ancestry to the family that is raising them, that you can see that very clearly. And when you look at the assimilation policies around the world, you can see the harm where mixed race indigenous babies are placed with predominantly Anglo families to be raised in that belief of breaking the indigenous out of them, where there are more dominant components of that ancestral trait as a base of that child's personality that is in direct conflict with the family that is raising them. And that is a component that needs to be understood and realized, because it is a real component of why a lot of adoptions fail. I've seen loads of videos online of people going to China or Asian countries to pick up their baby, or Africa when, Oprah, she created a real trend, and movie stars created a trend of going, go get an African baby. And then years down the line, years down the trail, you start to see how these children have turned out. And you can see the difficulties within their families and the consequences of that cross-cultural adoption process. And a large component of that is because the epigenetic inheritance was never understood. It became a point of contention within the family that was raising you. Now, if, in the right way of adopting a child from an orphanage in another country, if the adoptive parents were, working in that orphanage for years, built a bond with a specific child, learned components and aspects of that child's culture, integrated those cultural aspects within that upbringing, the adoption can work. Definitely the adoption can work. There will always be certain difficulties, but with the right knowledge and the right awareness, those difficulties can be worked with and overcome, and the harm can be minimalized. But in the world of adoption, that is so often not the case. There is so little value of where the child come from. Everything about adoption by design is to erase where that child come from and to transplant the identity assigned by the adoptive family onto that child. Now, as part of that ball of energy, a ball of emotion, a ball of trauma response energy and feelings and adrenaline and everything tied up with the process of removal, that fuels that conflict. And the child separates, the child feels alone, the child feels isolated. Further embedding the need to survive, further embedding those dominant traits, and those forces clash to a point where adoptions fail. Epigenetic inheritance, the key point of this video, is to value and understand and what epigenetics is, the science of understanding the information we inherited and how our body works with it, not just in physical appearance, but in the way we are as a person. And understanding how that plays a part when you traumatize a tiny person, an infant or a young child, in the way they're going to encapsulate and try to process that trauma. I really hope you guys understand and value this. As always, please hit the like button and the share button. Please subscribe. I love your guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful. Please be safe. And I'll see you all next time. Hope.